Welcome back to the channel, everyone. So today's project is we're going to do a laminate floor on this flooring here in this living room. This had a laminate floor previously. This is one of our apartments. Unfortunately, the people that were here seemed to confuse it with a dog kennel. And the floor, while it didn't look horrible, it smelled horrible. It was really bad. Ended up having to rip it out, and they were locking their dogs up in this area, and it was really stinky in here. What we ended up doing here is just coating it with a bunch of polyurethane to kind of seal the smell in. It was either that or rip it all up. Did what we had to do and got it pulled out, and now it's just a matter of going back through and putting new flooring down. So we got some picked up, and we'll go through the process. It's pretty straightforward. These laminate floorings just clip together, go down pretty quick. There's a few tricks I can show you along the way, but for the most part, it's just lay them out, put them together, and cut them as you go. So the first several rows on a floor like this are very critical to get down properly and attached properly. The kits come with spacer blocks that you can use to space between the floor and the wall. And the reason for that is these are floating floors, which means as they expand or contract throughout the seasons for warmth or humidity, then they can expand into that gap that the spacer blocks are giving you. Otherwise, they could bulge and pop and make the floor split apart. And the biggest trick I can show you when putting these down is take this piece and flip it 180 like I did. This is the end of your row, and that's where you're going to cut it. It's just that simple. You don't have to measure with a tape measure. Just flip it over and mark it. And what you're going to do is just give yourself a little gap there. I'm pointing to these, noting that you can pull these trim pieces off and then just cut them shorter. But so I got those pulled off. I'm going to put it up against the wall, give myself a little bit of gap there for expansion gap, and then just mark that piece where it overlaps with the other piece. No measuring needed, just a pen or a pencil. Mark it, take it out and cut it, and then you can slide it right in and it'll go right into its place. Another thing you may run into, like I did here, is a wall that's not straight. So on the right side, I've got it right flush against the wall. On the left side, I've got it right flush against the wall. In the middle, I have this big gap. So I'm going to square this up by cutting this side at a taper so that that gap will just go away. Obviously, I need some gap, but not that huge of a gap. And here I'm just marking out for one of the register boxes for the floor for a heat vent. I'm going to mark it out, and I happen to be close to my wood shop, so I'm just going to cut it right on the bandsaw and save myself some time. Normally you use a jigsaw, but the bandsaw was right there in handy. With that cut, I can put it into place and then get down the first two rows and double check and triple check to make sure everything is square. Again, these first couple of rows are critical. And part of the reason for that is as you're working, they're going to slide around a lot until you get 4 or sometimes 5 rows down. So you have the weight to hold everything together. You can also, as you get more rows down, start working on top of that surface, and then your body weight on top of the floor will keep it from moving around as you're trying to work. The trim pieces I of course pulled off since they were easy to get off, but the door frame itself, the door jamb, I need to cut with a back saw. And I'm just taking one of my floor pieces and using that as a spacer and getting it marked. and then I can use the back saw to cut the bottom of the door jamb off so that my future pieces will slide right underneath that. If you don't have a back saw like this, you can always pull the door jamb out to cut it, or try and use a regular hand saw. You just have to give yourself enough space, maybe go a little extra height on it. But the better this cut you make, the better the floor will look. I purposely started from that wall so that when I did the closet, it would be easier to continue the rows. So the wall's my nice flat new started surface, and then I have this little short jaunt in the closet that I can just go in and start from the wall in there, and then they'll meet up, and there shouldn't be much we'll have to modify to make it work. So now that I'm out of the closet area, you can see that the flooring starts going down really quick. And one of the tricks I can share with you is what I'm doing here is I'm putting a row together completely, getting it cut using my flip over trick, getting it cut, getting it assembled lengthwise, and then I kind of fold it up and tap it down into the next row so it all comes in as one piece. And I'm going back through and then using the wedge block to tap that row in. And you need to get that row so it latches down in with a previous row. And I'll slow this row down a little bit so you can see exactly what's going on. I'm attaching these, I'm actually fastening the row together, snapping them together, going out, cutting my piece, coming back, and then when I get back here, I'm going to take the entire row, lift it up, slide it down into that groove, and then use the wedge and the hammer to push it down and rotate it down into that groove so it's a nice, firm, and solid connection. And this brings me to another major tip. You got to make sure your your slots are clean. So this one has some dirt in it. It's actually some broken pieces of the flooring itself. Well, it kind of looks like a little chunk of cardboard there. That will keep that row from snapping in together. So you got to make sure that you keep that clean, blow that all out. Otherwise it will not snap together. You will also run into problems like this where everything is at an angle. I believe this is a heat duct that runs up through the wall, and I had to cut an angled piece. You can just kind of tap it into place and snap it in. You don't have to worry about it popping up later because we have a piece of trim that's going to go down here. That's what this edge tool is for, is to hook that over it and snap that down in. So here's the predicament. I've got to get this piece in, and you can see this is at an angle, and I've got it cut to length. The rest of the piece that I used to fill in that hole, but I need to get this angle right. So I used the flip trick to flip it over and mark how long that needs to be. So right here, this is going to be cut that wide. So that fits in there. Now I need to figure out the other end. So what I'm going to do is to take a full piece and set it in the groove here. And this is the piece that's going to be filling that gap and running through. So now I know that this piece is going to go from here to fill in there. And then on this side, it's going to have to be that wide to fill in there. So we'll grab the marker and we'll mark here. And again, I need to leave a little bit here for expansion. And I'm going to mark it right here. Now, notice how close I'm putting that. The reason for that is that this piece here is going to tuck inside of that when it goes in. So this gap is actually bigger than it looks. Even though it only looks like a millimeter, it's going to be inside that. So it's going to be wider. So now I have my 2 points here. And this one I need to transfer to the other side. Fortunately, the trim hides much of this, so it's not exact science. But I'm just going to draw a straight line through there, and then I'll take it out in the table saw in the wood shop and cut that. So this will often happen where when you have nothing to back it against, these pieces will shift out. So this piece is actually straight, but this gap isn't because this needs to go in, it's because this needs to come this way. So what you do here is you take your edge tool, set it there, and then you either need to get a couple more rows out for more support, or you can stand on this and then tap this in this way. Another tip for you when measuring out for the holes for the ductwork, the majority of the time when you set these up, you can actually reach through the hole and just mark out where your hole needs to be in the duct. So I'm going to take my pen, I'm just going to stick my hand down in through the duct and then mark from the underside up, and that's where I'm going to take it out and cut it with the jigsaw. Left with a super small gap, so I need to cut a piece that's barely a ½ inch wide. It'll be held down by trim. Normally you wouldn't want a piece that small. You'd have to like cut over there to make it wider or something, but since it's going to be held down by trim, it shouldn't be a problem. In fact, you probably won't even be able to see it once the trim is in place, because the trim's going to be going about there. But I'm going to cut a small piece from there. And of course my last row is not going to be square either, so I need to go mark that out and then rip that on a table saw or with a jigsaw to get that so it is straight with a ball. So some of you might be wondering why I'm not using the dead blow hammer with this tool. There's two reasons. One, this particular flooring took a lot of pressure, force to snap in together, which is good because that means it's going to stay with it. So I had to use the hammer for a little more power. And two, this particular tool, no matter how careful you are with it, always ends up bent by the time you're done with your project. So I had to get a new one. And my dead blow hammer was pretty beat up, so I had to get a new one. So what I did was, I bought a complete kit at Lowe's, which had everything in it. Now, realizing there was a major design flaw. This particular dead blow hammer is curved, which means when you go to hit it, it's almost impossible to not bounce off as you're hitting. It's very hard to get good force on that when you're hitting this. Like every single time I hit it would just roll, which is why I shifted over to the regular hammer, and that works a lot better. This is what it looks like. I've got all the trim pieces just kind of lazily placed into place, so you can see what it's going to look like. I've got one more heat register to put back in place, so we'll grab that. Still going to tack all those down. That fits in nice. We'll tack all the trim pieces down. And still need to finish up this closet. Hopefully I have enough with the $1 I have left to do that. It looks like I'm actually going to need to buy a whole new $40 box for maybe 2 pieces. That's going to suck. So as it turned out, it made it all the way to the end. I have one little piece left, as you saw there on the floor, but I also have one full piece. And what I'm going to do is just cut that to length and width and use that full piece right there for that last piece, just so there's no joints, just one big complete full piece that's going to go down. I'll put trim around that and just a little bit after this video, and that'll hold everything down around the edges so nothing flops up. And other than that, we are done, and I didn't have to go buy another box. Yay!